Dad didn't raise his voice. He never had to. He placed his napkin on the plate like a verdict and said, "Lacey, you don't belong at this table." Knives paused mid-air. Someone's water glass clinked too loud against porcelain. My brother Bryce smirked as if he'd been waiting for the cue all evening. Before we go on, if justice stories like this are your thing, hit subscribe to Revenge with John and tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own father kicked you out at family dinner? I looked at the long walnut table, the one with the hairline cracked down the center that Dad pretended not to see and Mom rubbed lemon oil into on Sundays. The chandelier above us threw obedient light, polishing everyone's certainty. My chair, third from the head on the left, was the chair I'd used since I was 12, back when my feet couldn't touch the floor and Mom snuck me extra mashed potatoes under the tablecloth. "You don't belong," he said again, quieter this time, as if volume could be confused with mercy. "If you're not going to support this family, you don't get the privilege of sitting with it." Support. I almost laughed. Instead, I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and let the word sit there, heavy as a coin that had passed through too many hands. Bryce leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "You heard him," he said, aiming his voice at the cousins gathered like witnesses. "We all pull our weight here. Funny thing about weight, no one notices you lifting it until you set it down." "Dad," I said, careful, even. "We agreed we wouldn't do this in front of everyone." "We agreed you'd help," he snapped, the mask slipping. "Your brother needs runway to keep his business afloat. A real family steps up." Mom's fork scratched the plate. She didn't look up. She never looked up when Dad and Bryce spoke in absolutes. It was safer to keep her eyes on the gravy boat, as though the right pour might change the ending. A week earlier in Dad's office, he'd closed the door and asked for more again. Bridge funding, he called it, a phrase that made it sound temporary and strategic and not like the hole it really was. I had said no. Not because I couldn't, but because I'd learned what happens when a hole is fed, holes get hungry. "You know I've supported this family," I said now, voice steady. "For years." Bryce barked a laugh. You? You left. You live in the city, you post pictures of lattes. You show up for birthdays and give speeches about boundaries. Spare us." "Enough," Dad said, though he didn't mean enough, he meant more. "You've made your choice, Lacey. Make another one." He waited for me to beg. It's hard to change a ritual when everyone likes their lines. I pushed my chair back. The legs squealed against the hardwood, an undignified sound in a dignified room. "If I don't belong," I said, "I won't stay." No one moved to stop me. Not even Mom. The chair rocked slightly as I left it behind, an empty outline in a perfect tableau, one missing shape where a daughter had been. I walked out with my palms flat against my thighs, like a diver keeping balance on a high board. The foyer smelled like furniture polish and old victories. Halfway to the door, I paused by the small mahogany cabinet against the wall, the one with the hydraulic hinge Bryce had once broken and I had quietly paid to fix. I touched the edge of it, then let my hand fall. Outside, the evening air was cool enough to make my anger organize itself. People wonder how a father could not know who pays his mortgage. He knows. Mine did. He knew the day the bank called 3 years ago and asked for authorization to add a second source to the account because his seasonal cash flow, his words, had come up short. He knew when he signed the servicer's form to allow a third-party payee. He knew every month when the statement said applied, ACH, Sable Home Support, LLC, and he never once asked why the LLC's address matched my office suite. He knew when he made a joke at Thanksgiving about mystery angels, and wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew because pride is not the same thing as ignorance. Pride just prefers the dark. I'd started those payments the winter Mom called me whispering from the laundry room, over the throb of the washer, because fear needs a rhythm to hide behind. "Your father says it's under control," she'd said, but the man from the bank left a door hanger. I'd opened my laptop that night and built a shell company in 2 hours between a takeout dinner and a server deploy. Sable Home Support, LLC. A name dull enough to disappear. I wired the first payment before midnight. I told Dad the next day in his office with the blinds half closed. He stared at the carpet so long I wondered if he'd fallen asleep standing up. "Fine," he said finally. "But we don't advertise." We. As if the silence were a shared project. I drove home from the dinner on muscle memory alone, the wipers smearing a clean arc across a windshield already clear. In my apartment, The living room lamp found my plants, my furniture, my book left open on the arm of the sofa, objects that did not hold a vote on my worth. The phone buzzed. A text from Mom. He didn't mean it like that. Another, Bryce is under a lot of pressure right now. A third, unsent but I could feel it, hovering. Thank you for everything you do. She never typed that one. Gratitude felt like contraband in that house. I sat at the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. The bank's portal asked for two-factor, then blinked me into a lobby painted in midnight blues. Mortgage, Hale Residence. Status, current. Next draft, the 15th. Payer, Sable Home Support. I rolled the cursor over the small gray link that said manage. Dad's words replayed, if you're not going to support this family, you don't get the privilege of sitting with it. My hands were steady. I clicked manage. A panel slid out, pause automatic payments. A warning in orange, pausing may result in late fees or default. Default. Such an ugly word for a home that had been defaulting to me for 3 years. I didn't hit confirm. Not yet. Revenge works best when you know exactly what you're asking it to do. I thought of Mom and her lemon oil, the way she smoothed it into wood until the grain gave up its dullness. Was I punishing her too? Years had taught me that in our family, consequences traveled in the wrong direction, finding the quiet people first. But then I heard Bryce's easy certainty, we all pull our weight here. And Dad's line, sharp as a border, you don't belong at this table. I had paid for that table. For the roof above it. For the comfort that made manners possible. If my seat had no place in their story, neither did my money. I closed the laptop without confirming and stood, pacing the length of the kitchen. The city hummed outside, a steady, indifferent sound. I tried on the shape of what would come next, Dad explaining to Mom why the statement looked different, Bryce shrugging off the door hanger as clerical, the house learning, slowly then all at once, what my absence sounded like. My phone lit up with a new message, this time from Dad. You embarrassed us tonight. Come back when you're ready to be part of this family. Not my family. This family. As if belonging were something I could sign like a check. I opened the laptop again. The portal had timed out, security that assumed people forget quickly. I didn't. I signed back in, navigated the same midnight blues, the same polite warnings. Pause automatic payments? I hovered, then moved past it to the smaller link below, end automatic payments. The language was more final, less forgiving. A new warning appeared in red, this action cannot be undone. You can set up new payments later. Later is a word that abusers love. Later is how debts get collected from the wrong people. I clicked end. The screen pulsed, thought, and returned with a new status, autopay off. I exhaled and surprised myself by laughing, a small shocked sound, like a hiccup in a church. On the counter, the door key to my parents' house sat where I dropped it months ago after fixing the back lock myself because Dad didn't have time. I picked it up, felt its worn teeth, then set it in the shallow dish by the door where I kept things I was willing to lose. Tomorrow would bring emails and calls and eventually, door hangers. Pride would have to sign for the delivery. Bryce would say clerical until the math betrayed him. Dad would go very still, the way men do when the story they've memorized skips a line. I turned off the lamp and let the dark find its shape around me. If they didn't want my chair, they could have my silence. The call came 3 weeks later. Not from Dad, not from Bryce, not even from Mom. It came from the bank. Mrs. Hale, the voice said, though I'd never taken my father's name. This is a courtesy call. We're reaching out because the Hale residence mortgage payment has not been received. Do you intend to continue your support arrangement? Support arrangement. Even the bank dressed it in polite clothes. I almost said yes. My finger hovered above the trackpad, ready to click into their portal and erase the evidence of my absence. But then Dad's words replayed in my head, sharp, dismissive, unyielding. You don't belong at this table. No, I said simply. I won't be continuing. The banker hesitated. Are you sure? It could put the property at risk. I'm sure. The line clicked, a record added to their system. A small, invisible note that history had just changed. At first, nothing happened. The house looked the same in pictures Mom sent of Sunday roasts. Dad still posted his little quotes on Facebook about hard work and family values. Bryce still swaggered in and out of dinners like the heir to an empire he hadn't built. But silence has a way of stacking. 1 month without my payments became 2. By the 3rd, the cracks began to show. Mom called in whispers, always from rooms where doors were closed. "Your father's been tense," she said once, her voice muffled like she was speaking through cloth. "He doesn't say why, but he's restless." Restless. The word meant bills piling on the counter, phone calls he didn't answer, envelopes shoved into drawers. I knew the rhythm by heart, I'd carried it for him for years. Then Bryce slipped. I ran into him at a coffee shop downtown, all pressed shirt and bravado, but his eyes betrayed him, bloodshot, frantic. He spotted me, forced a grin, and sat across the table like we were siblings who liked each other. "Lacey," he said, voice too bright. "Listen, funny thing. Dad mentioned you were helping with, some side stuff. You're not, stepping back, are you?" I looked at him. Really looked. His hands were restless, drumming the table. His collar was loose like he'd yanked at it too many times. This wasn't concern for Dad. This was fear for himself. "I thought you said I don't pull my weight," I said calmly. "That I only post lattes." His smile faltered. "Look, things are tight right now. The company's in transition. Dad's handling it, of course, but," he leaned in, lowering his voice. "You know how much those payments mean. If they stop, it looks bad. For him. For me. For me." There it was. The truth had slipped out. I stood, sliding my untouched coffee back toward the counter. "Then maybe you should finally pull your own weight." His eyes flared. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. I left him there, his empire trembling on a foundation he hadn't realized was already gone. 2 weeks later, Dad called. Not the booming voice of authority. Not the clipped commands of a man who thought words were bullets. This was a smaller voice, tighter, like he was holding a knife by the wrong end. "Lacey," he said. "We need to talk." I almost laughed. "We?" As if I'd ever been part of his equations. But instead I said, "About the house?" Silence. Then begrudgingly, "Yes." That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering against the glass, and let the memory of that family dinner replay. The clink of silverware, the smug tilt of Bryce's smile, Dad's voice cutting me down in front of everyone. He thought he'd taken my place at the table. But the truth was about to surface. I had built the table, paid for its legs, kept the roof above it. And now, without me, they were finally going to learn what absence costs. It started with a piece of paper. Not an official letter, not yet. Just a bright orange slip stuck to the front door of the Hale residence. Notice, payment past due. Contact your lender immediately. A neighbor saw it first and whispered. The whispers spread down the street faster than the ink on the page. By evening, Mom had yanked the notice down and stuffed it into her apron pocket before the roast was even out of the oven. But neighbors talk, and talk is harder to hide than paper. Dad tried to cover it. At church that Sunday, he joked about clerical errors and banks being greedy as ever. He said it with that booming confidence people had learned not to question. But Bryce's face betrayed him. He looked like a man already drowning, grinning with water in his lungs. By the next week, a letter came, official, typed, stamped. This one couldn't be hidden in an apron. The mortgage was 3 months delinquent. Unless payment was received immediately, proceedings would begin. That's when the calls started. Mom first. "Lacey," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please. Your father won't admit it, but we're in trouble. He won't let me say more, but you know what I mean." Then Bryce. His tone wasn't pleading, it was accusing. "This is your fault. You think cutting us off proves something? You're ruining the family name, Lacey. Dad's reputation. My business. Everyone's talking." I didn't argue. I let him spit venom through the line, his anger just another debt he wanted me to pay. Finally, Dad called. This time there was no authority in his voice. Only gravel. "Lacey. We need you back. Just until we get through this." I closed my eyes, listening. The same man who, weeks before, had pointed across the table and told me I didn't belong, now reaching for me like a lifeline. "You told me I wasn't family," I said softly. He stopped. His breath caught. I didn't mean it that way. You know I say things. But the house, it's your mother's home. Don't punish her. For a moment, guilt pricked me. Mom's lemon oil on the table, her quiet eyes, her loyalty to a man who never let her speak. She didn't deserve this. But then I thought of all the years they'd let me carry the weight in silence, never once offering gratitude, only expectation. I thought of Bryce mocking me at that very table, while I paid for the roof above his head. I'm not punishing her, I said. I'm just stopping the punishment of me. He tried again. If you just help us one more time. Help. I interrupted. I already did. 4 years. And you pretended not to notice. Now you want me to erase the truth again. I won't. Silence. Then the faintest click as he ended the call. That night, I walked past the dish by my door where their house key still sat. I picked it up, weighed it in my hand. The metal was cool, familiar, worn from years of use. Then I set it back down. The house wasn't mine to save anymore. It was theirs to lose. The white envelope arrived on a Thursday. Thick paper. Red letters. No jokes, no clerical errors to hide behind this time. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. The words might as well have been carved into the front door. Mom was the one who found it, tucked in the mailbox between a grocery flyer and a coupon booklet. Her hands shook as she slid it across the kitchen table. Dad didn't even open it at first, just stared at the return address like it had spat in his face. When he finally tore it open, his knuckles went pale. Bryce read over his shoulder and swore loud enough for the neighbors to hear. By Friday, the whispers were everywhere. Neighbors slowed down when they walked past the house. Some pretended to check their mail twice in one day just to glance at the Hales' porch. At church that weekend, people looked at Dad the way you look at a man whose suit is sharp but whose shoes are coming apart at the soles. Trouble at the bank, someone whispered. Heard Bryce's business is tied up in it too, another added. Can you imagine? After all his speeches about responsibility. Dad held his head high, but his jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Bryce avoided eye contact, his once proud swagger reduced to curt nods and muttered excuses. Then the shouting started inside the house. You should have kept your mouth shut. Bryce roared one night, his voice carrying down the block. You had to humiliate her at dinner, didn't you? Now she's letting us sink. And you? Dad snapped back. You're supposed to be stepping up. Instead, you're running around with your half-baked deals, counting on her like a crutch. Mom tried to shush them, but her voice drowned in theirs. The neighbors heard every word through open windows. And for the first time, the secret they'd kept for years, that their strong Hale household rested on the daughter they pushed away, was seeping into the streetlights. Meanwhile, I lived my life in the city, watching the storm from a distance. Articles began circulating about rising foreclosures in affluent neighborhoods. I didn't need a reporter to tell me what was happening at the house I once saved. Dad hadn't called again. Neither had Bryce. Pride was their anchor, dragging them deeper even as they flailed. But silence said more than words. Their rage wasn't aimed at each other anymore. It was aimed at me. The one person who could have stopped it. The one person who chose not to. On Monday morning, Mom called, her voice cracked. They're losing it, Lacey. The bank gave 30 days. Your father won't admit it, but he's scared. I've never seen him scared before. I closed my eyes, listening to her breathe through tears. My chest ached, but my resolve held. They told me I didn't belong at the table, I whispered. Now they know what that really means. By the end of that week, a foreclosure sign staked into the front yard. Neighbors slowed down their cars, their faces a mix of pity and curiosity. The mighty Hale household, reduced to a cautionary tale. And me? I didn't need to drive past to see it. The image was already burned into my memory. The chair I once sat in, empty. The roof I once paid for, slipping from their hands. The family that told me I didn't belong, finally learning how much I had carried all along. The call came late, after midnight. Not from Mom this time, not from Bryce. It was Dad. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. All I could hear was the sound of his breathing, heavy, uneven, like the weight of words pressing down his throat. Lacey, he said finally, the name brittle in his mouth. We need you back. The bank, They'll take the house. Your mother, he trailed off. I waited. I wanted to see if the word please existed anywhere in his vocabulary. But it didn't. Before I go further, don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with John for more powerful endings like this. And tell me in the comments, if your father begged you to save the home he once threw you out of, what would you do? I agreed to meet him. Not because I wanted to, but because every story deserves its final chapter. When I arrived, the house looked smaller, shabbier, as though the foreclosure sign on the lawn had shrunk its very bones. The lights were dim, and for the first time in my life, the Hale residence looked less like a fortress and more like what it really was, a house in denial. Dad was at the dining table, the same table where he once told me I didn't belong. The same table I had paid for, plank by plank, without their knowing. His hands rested on the wood, but he didn't look at me when I walked in. Sit, he said. I didn't. I stayed standing, my eyes fixed on him. You can fix this, he said quietly. One call. One payment. You've done it before. I shook my head. You told me this wasn't my table. His head jerked up. That was anger. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I cut in. My voice was calm, colder than I intended. You meant every word. And I believed you. I believed you so much I stopped trying to prove otherwise. I carried you, Dad. I carried this house, this family, while you pretended you were the one holding it all together. His jaw tightened, his eyes watering in ways he would never name as tears. Lacey, he whispered, softer this time, don't punish your mother. I swallowed hard. Mom, who had pressed lemon oil into the wood to cover its cracks. Mom, who had whispered thanks but never dared speak them aloud in front of him. Mom, who stayed quiet so long that silence had become her inheritance. I'm not punishing her, I said. I'm punishing the lie. Bryce stormed in then, red-faced, his voice cracking with rage. This is your fault. You ruined us, Lacey. You could have saved everything, but you let it fall apart just to prove a point. I turned to him, my gaze steady. No, Bryce. I stopped saving you so you could finally see what you are without me. And what you are is nothing you've ever claimed to be. He lunged forward, but Dad raised a hand, not to protect me but to silence him. For once, Bryce obeyed. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. I placed my house key on the table, the one I'd kept in the dish by my door for years. Its teeth glinted under the dim light. This was the last piece of me you had left, I said. Now it's yours again. Just like you wanted. Dad stared at it, his shoulders slumping. For the first time, he looked smaller than the chair he sat in. I turned to leave. My footsteps echoed in the hollow house, each one cutting the cord that had tied me to this place for too long. At the door, I paused, my hand on the knob. You said I didn't belong at this table, I said without looking back. And now, neither does the table itself. Then I walked out, leaving the house, and the weight of them behind. The foreclosure went through. The house was sold, stripped of the pride that had hidden its cracks. Dad's name became a whisper in the neighborhood, a cautionary tale about arrogance and denial. Bryce faded into bitterness, always blaming but never building. And me? I built my own table. One where I belonged. One where gratitude lived, not as contraband, but as welcome speech. Because the sweetest revenge isn't destroying what hurt you. It's walking away knowing it can no longer touch you.